Hi everybody, welcome back. It's been quite a while since I've talked about this thing, PicoGUS. The main reason why I haven't been able to talk about it is because I haven't been here. I haven't been here at my workbench working on it. I've been out of town helping out family members, and I just haven't had the chance to sit down and really dive into things. Now, something that I've been trying to think about is how to work on it when I'm not here. And something happened pretty recently is this thing came out. It's the Hand386. It's a full real 386 handheld. It's developed in China, and it's actually available from AliExpress right now. And it has a real ISA connector on it. Well, it's not really an ISA connector, it's pins. But you can actually plug ISA devices into it via breakout. I was thinking, you know what? This would be kind of a cool mobile development platform for PicoGUS. But you have to use this ISA breakout thing. You plug it in, it's kind of hanging off, and it plugs into the side. It's not really the best thing. And since I have been away, I've had my laptop with me, and I still have KiCad installed on it. So I've been poking around and trying to figure out if I can miniaturize it, and I actually have. So this is the new PicoGUS, I call it the PicoGUS Hand386 Edition. It's a very small miniaturized version of PicoGUS. It plugs right in to the ISA connector on the side and sticks out like that. And it's completely 100% firmware compatible. It has the same chips on it, and it works just as well as the full-size PicoGUS. So I'm going to give you a bit of a tour around how I developed it, kind of what it does, what its features are. There's some really neat things, because I also have an ISA adapter. You can use it to plug into a real ISA slot on a computer. And I'll run through a few other things. I'll kind of put it through its paces. I'll run some demos on the Hand386, because that's something that I haven't really been seen around, is people running demos on it. So let's give it a shot, and let's give you a tour. All right. All right, let's give you a short tour. So this is the original PicoGUS board. It's about the minimum size that you can have for an 8-bit ISA card that also can use the standard Keystone ISA bracket. It has a external soldered on to headers DAC module. This is a commonly available DAC module you can buy on Amazon or AliExpress or other sources. Raspberry Pi Pico on headers, or it can be surface mounted onto the board. Various bus control chips and PSRAM chip just for the Gravis ultrasound sample memory. And also jumpers to choose your IRQ and DMA, and a MIDI output. So it's actually not a very complex board. Not a whole lot of the routing isn't too crazy. It's a 2-layer board, and it's sure pretty well, but there are a few issues with it. For one, it uses this TSSOP chips, and it is an open source project, and it is available for you to create your own. But there's been a lot of problems people have run into DIYing this. This is about at the limits for a lot of people to do surface mount soldering without very specialized equipment or magnification. So it does, it presents some problems. And I've kind of always wanted to have a ready-to-go assemblable version that can be assembled at places like JLC PCB, which offers very cheap PCB assemblies. So this is an example of what comes straight from JLC PCB, and this is the design. Just about everything that's on this board is on this board. Some differences are the DAC I've integrated in directly. This is a Burr-Brown PCM 5100. It's not a PCM 5102. The only difference between the 5100 and 5102 is that 5100 is around 100 decibel signal noise ratio, and the 5102 is like 112. At 44.1 kilohertz 16-bit audio, it doesn't really matter. I think it sounds great. I also changed some things. One of the bus chips from a 74 LVC to a 74 AHC to work around some issues with the reset line on the Hand386, which is kind of noisy. It's a little bit more noise tolerant. It's not exactly TTL compatible, but at the voltage levels we're working at, it's actually not too bad. So taking this is what comes out of the box of JLC PCB, then do some assembly. And that assembly includes headers here to plug in a Raspberry Pi Pico, and a header here, a connector that go into the Hand386's ISA bus connector. and a few things to enable reset. I mentioned that noisy reset line. If you have problems with a noisy reset line, you can just take that off and it just completely disables reset. No big deal. UART connector, that's for debugging purposes. Most people aren't really going to use this unless they're having problems, or people like me who are actually doing development on it. Line out and MIDI out. MIDI out's a little bit different. This time I'm using a 2.5 millimeter instead of a 3 millimeter jack. I've noticed some people on the regular size PicoGUS have been plugging into the 3.5 millimeter jack and wondering why the audio is not working. It's because they plugged into the MIDI output. So I made it pretty painfully obvious. This is MIDI only by having a smaller jack. So the Raspberry Pi Pico just plugs right in via headers. This is a Raspberry Pi Pico H, which is just the same thing as a Raspberry Pi Pico, but it comes pre-soldered with headers. And that's it. It's ready to go. So then you can take your Hand386 and plug it in to the connector on the side of it. The IDC connector is a little bit tricky to line up because it's hard to center it, but once you have it in and centered, it just plugs right into the side, and there it is. You can turn on the Hand386. Takes a little while to start up. So what's something interesting about this Hand386 is that I mounted it with an IPS screen. So it's a lot better screen than what comes out of the box. So actually at an odd angle like this, just because of my camera angle, I'll probably fix this when I do some more my tour later. I'll have a better camera set up for it. But actually at an odd angle, you can actually see it, and it works just fine. So you can start mod player like HapaMod, and you can play some demos on it, or play some mods on it. So yeah, so let's get through and look at some other things. Now let's talk about the ISA adapter. It is pretty silly to have a device that is made for such a niche product as the Hand386. There's not a whole lot of people that have these, and people that have them aren't going to want to use them all the time. It's not the absolute best device to be running DOS on. It has issues with battery life. This out of the box, the screen is pretty bad unless you swap in an IPS screen, and the keyboard is pretty rough to type on. So rather than having a waste of something like this, I made an ISA adapter, so you can actually use this in a regular PC with an ISA slot, and I added a few neat features. So it plugs in just like it plugs in on the Hand386. And one thing you might notice is that there's two different places for it to attach to. One is here, and actually that will cause it so it sticks out of the side or out of the back of a PC that you have it plugged into. This one right here would make it so it actually is completely enclosed inside the system. Now we wonder why you'd want that. Well, one thing that's interesting is when it's sticking out, you have better Wi-Fi. And if you use a Raspberry Pi Pico W, you might be able to use it to emulate a network card that works over Wi-Fi. And I'm working with Kevin Moonlight, who's done a lot of work on NE2000 card emulation with the Raspberry Pi Pico W, and we're hoping that I can actually get it to run on this platform, which would be really cool. A few other neat things is I added a wavetable header and a volume control and a mixed audio output, which would mix the audio from the PicoGUS and the audio on the wavetable header together and come out of this common output socket right here. And I'll get into a little bit of how that works in just a little bit when I flip the board over. It lets you select the IRQ and DMA. When you have this plugged into the Hand386, it is forced to be IRQ5 and DMA1. The Hand386 is a fixed platform. While you have this plugged in, nothing else is going to be plugged in, so you don't have to worry about resource allocation issues. So to save space on the board, I omitted a jumper to set to resources, and it's just forced. But what this does, it lets you, once it's plugged into a real computer, you can actually choose what IRQ and DMA you have it on. Right now I have an IRQ2 because I was messing around with some MPU 401 emulation, and a lot of old MPU 401 titles require IRQ2 or IRQ9, depending on what you want to call it. So to get back into how the wavetable header and the MIDI output and the audio output work, is there's quite a few pins on this connector that are unused. It's basically a one-for-one copy of the ISA bus, but some of the pins go unused for some of the voltages that are not present inside the Hand386. The Hand386 is a 5-volt machine. It does not have -5 or +12 or -12 on its ISA bus, so those pins are available. They're not connected to anything on the Hand386, so they go to nowhere when it's actually plugged in. And I have a few jumpers on the back of this. These two jumpers right here, these solder bridge jumpers here, these then can route the audio back and into the ISA connector. This jumper right here does the same, but for MIDI. And it goes ahead and runs MIDI into the wavetable header. It's TTL MIDI, which is really handy. And it also runs the audio through here, and so you can mix it with the wavetable output. I don't have any wavetable cards right now, actually, so I don't have any way to test it. Fingers crossed that it actually is going to work. I've got a Dream Blaster S2 on the way from Certishop. I'm really hoping it works the first time. I don't see why it wouldn't work, but I might make a video talking about stuff like that. Something you might have seen in the background of these tour videos so far is this. It's a 3D printed case for this mini PicoGUS Hand386 Edition. This was designed by Fire219, one of the creators of the Pico Post, which is another really cool retro project that uses the Raspberry Pi Pico. It's a new way to really enhance how postcards work. It's based on a Raspberry Pi Pico, has an OLED on it with a little remote. It's really neat. I'll link to that project. I'm in the process of building one right now, so I don't have one to show you yet, but it's really neat. So anyway, Fire219 created this project, or created this 3D printable case for the PicoGUS. So yeah, line MIDI out, and it slots right in. And just a friction fit. But I think it looks really good. And then when it's plugged into the Hand386, it looks really nice. Very, very professional looking. So, yeah, that's it. We got this plugged into the side. I don't know. I think that looks really sweet. I like it. It almost looks like a product. Alright, next time I'll make sure that the Hand386 is fully charged before I start filming. So anyway, this was not a very short overview of just the GUS emulation part of the Hand386 edition of the PicoGUS. I didn't even go over anything else that it can do, such as MPU 401 emulation using this little MIDI jack right here. It works really well. I put it through its paces a few days ago. It works great. Also, AdLib emulation, CMS, and Tandy's 3-voice emulation, which by the way is greatly improved in the next version of the firmware, which is going to be coming out very soon. I'm very excited to release that. And other things, hopefully in the future, NE2000 emulation, maybe Sound Blaster emulation, who knows. So anyway, if you want to get a hold of one of these, I'm probably going to be putting some of these up on Tindy very, very soon. Kind of a small batch probably. Also, this September, September 9th and 10th, I'll be at the Vintage Computing Festival Midwest in Chicago, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll get to have a table there where I'm going to be showing off PicoGUS and other things, pretty much anything that is on the ISA bus that is being emulated with the Raspberry Pi Pico. So hopefully I'll be there, and hopefully I'll get to meet some of you there, which will be awesome. So anyway, hopefully also next video, not so much of a delay. So anyway, have a great one. See you all around.